I'm not going to drive a Mercedes. I'm not going to live in a mansion, but I don't need those things. I want to be able to know the person I'm taking care of. I want to hear their story.
This season of the SBA Roadshow is sponsored by Ready Capital.
I'm Dustin Baker. We're on a mission to build community through shared story. The road is calling. I'm gonna do some fun stuff, and you really ought to watch it because it's gonna be amazing, and all the cool kids are doing it. So join me on the SBA Roadshow. I'm gonna show you some snow in Denver, Colorado. We got about 6 inches of snow last night in Denver, so we are very much packed in. So it's really beautiful. We're headed to meet with Dr. Rosa Cisneros, who is an independent practitioner. She's an OBGYN in the north part of Denver, and she is an SBA customer of the gentleman we interviewed last night at Brian Burke. She is a success story of the SBA loan program. Looking forward to meeting with Dr. Cisneros, and we're on our way there. Well, Dr. Cisneros, thank you for joining us for the Roadshow. Take just a minute and kind of introduce yourself and your practice and kind of where you are. Kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. I'm Rosa Cisneros. I am so used to saying a solo practice OBGYN, but we're not solo practice anymore. But an OBGYN here in Thornton, Colorado, and a private practice physician. Have been in practice now since 2005. Colorado native, running a small practice, trying to stay in business, taking good care of patients.
You get to run your business based on your own ethics and your own, just the way you want to do things, but that's not easy to do in the medical community anymore, right?
It isn't, because there's such a push to move away from that model of spending time with the patient. And that's what I'm hoping to hang on to, is spending some time with my patient. To my knowledge, I think we are one of the only OBGYN practices that is privately owned now in all of northern Colorado. I'm not going to drive a Mercedes. I'm not going to live in a mansion, but I don't need those things. I want to be able to know the person I'm taking care of. I want to hear their story. That's what got me into medicine, is hearing the stories.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to hear that there's still folks that have that ideal of really taking care of people. Let's talk a little bit about, so we connected around the fact that you got an SBA loan that helped you to purchase this building. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the process of going from being a tenant to being an owner, and kind of how the SBA program played into that, and kind of what opportunities that created for you as a business owner, as a practitioner here.
Okay, so it's a long story.
Okay.
Starts way back in 2005.
Oh, wow.
When I first got out of residency and was in the process of switching jobs. And my mother had met the physician who owned the building here. And so she kept saying, go talk to Dr. Berg. And so in the course of time, I basically sat down to talk with him, because I thought, well, I'll talk to him, that'll put Mom at ease. And then I'll be able to say, okay, nothing panned out here, I'm going to have to go out of town. And in sitting down to talk with him, he owned the practice, had been in practice for over, I think, 40 years, family physician. And he said, I'll help you out, and I'll help you start a practice. And I was like, okay, this is unheard of. Maybe this is not quite right. But he did. He helped me start the practice. He had children, but none of them went into medicine. And so when he came to looking at, okay, I'm getting to the end of my life, and what am I going to do with all of this? He sat down and talked with me and said, I'd like you to be able to buy it. Do you think you'd be able to buy it? And I said, well, of course, right now I can't. So he said, well, let's give you first right of refusal.
Wow.
Well, just hand me $1, and that'll give you first right of refusal. And so when it comes to it, we'll tell them that you've already put $1 down on the building. As time went on, he became ill. He passed away, and his estate took over the management of the building. And when they looked at, okay, what are we going to do with this? They came back and they said, we know that you have the first right of refusal. Our dad told us that you had already purchased to put money down on the building. And I was like, well, yes, it was
A
$1.
George Washington Day. Right, exactly.
And so, but they honored that. I don't have several million sitting in the bank.
Right.
So we went to the bank, and in the process of, they said, okay, well, because of the relationship with our dad and because of what he wanted and his wishes, we're going to give you a different price. And so they dropped the price tremendously. Started with our bank that we'd known for a while, and they said, well, maybe the SBA would be a better option for you.
Okay.
And so they referred us to another community bank, and we worked with the vice president there and looked at the SBA, and he said, okay, I think this might be a better model for Brian's group at CRF and that kind of SBA lending, because you're female-owned and minority, and you're catering to this specific niche. And that led to the relationship with Brian.
So I helped a woman doctor with to buy a building. She had a very good practice, and this was a big deal for her. It wasn't a huge financial transaction, but it was huge for her.
It was a long haul, and lots of times you don't find somebody who will stick with you through that whole process. But the SBA was there, and Brian and his group were there to say, okay, we'll work with you on this.
So what are the challenges that you're faced with? I mean, other than not driving a Mercedes and living in a mansion, what are the challenges that you're faced with maintaining independent practice in an environment where that's not the norm? And you've had some personal adversity in addition to the pandemic. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about that, but walk me through kind of the challenges of the last year and how your business has, through determination and grit, how you have maintained what you've done and navigated your way through this time.
Well, I like that you say determination and grit, but it really is the grace of God. Because we were doubly hit last year. We had to deal with COVID, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So at that time, I was in solo practice, and so had to step away from the practice. But before we knew about all that, dealing just with the pandemic, teaching patients that, okay, to keep everybody safe, we can't have mom and grandma and everybody in the waiting room are coming in for ultrasounds. And, okay, we don't usually allow video recording. Well, now we're going to have to allow them to have some kind of video connection with their family, because you're coming in for the ultrasound to meet your baby, and dad can't be here. Hear the heartbeat for the first time. Okay, now we're going to let them record it. Now we're going to let them say, okay, let's get on Facebook so you can have family members hear this, because we can't have them physically in the office. Dealing with that piece of it. And then at the same time, dealing on the personal level of, okay, I can't physically be here. So getting the help of colleagues who were able to come in, step in and help us, and two very special people, Mrs. Mary Lou Hendricks and Dr. Shannon Forsetter, who stepped in to help. Dr. Barnes and Dr. Hennessy, colleagues of mine who stepped in to help and say, okay, we'll help you get through this and see patients for you in person.
It's really inspirational. I think there's been so much negative press in the last year and so much political turmoil, but I think what people need to hear are the stories of how in adversity people rally around those who need to be rallied around, and we lift each other up. And so it sounds like that really has been your experience over the course of this last year.
That really has been our experience. I think not only was the world dealing with the pandemic, there's been a lot of unrest, there's been political stuff, there's been more talk about racism, and we hear about all the hate and all the mean things that are happening and how people are tearing each other down, but we don't hear about the good part. And even in this time that in some ways was the worst year of my life, I had the opportunity to see people come in and help, and people build each other up, which was unexpected. Working with our bankers, working with our vendors, working with staff, with hospital, with colleagues and patients to say, okay, we're going to come together and we're going to get through this year, was amazing. And I'm still, when I think about all the little details of how it fell into place, absolutely astounding. Like you think, okay, this doesn't happen anymore, but I've witnessed it.
One more question I want to ask you, and that is just as you look forward and kind of see the future, what is maybe one lesson that you will take away from all of the adversity of this last year that you'll take forward for good in the future?
That it's still important to reach your hand out to somebody else. No matter what is going on, someday you're going to need it, and you're going to have the opportunity to pay it forward. I'm a Christian, so I always say every one of us needs the grace of God, but we have to extend that grace to somebody else. And that has been something that has been driven home to me so concretely this year. Thank the Lord I'm still here. Survived it.
Yeah, well said. Well, it's been really delightful to sit and visit with you. Thank you for doing
Likewise.
this. And wish you the best as you get re-engaged with your practice in person. And it's exciting.
Thank you.
See you down the road. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Show out there if you'd like
Okay.
to see it. And that way, I think your email's probably there, but I've got it anyway from Ryan. So
I'll make sure we don't have a seizure.
waited for us. Yeah, waited for us.
Subscribe to our newsletter at sbaroadshow.com/subscribe to see where we'll be next.